From this day forward, it's going to be only America first. America first. As President of the United States, I will always put America first. Make America great again. America first. We put America first now. For us, it's America first. That's the way it is.
And that is the president in a series of speeches with one theme, very similar outfits, talking about America first, which is a very interesting thing to have that phrase as you go to the World Economic Summit with the who's who of people with big bucks, of globalists. What's going to be the message there? And is it true, we heard Axios say yesterday, that there's a lot of intrigue about what the president's going to say and how he's going to hold himself on the world stage?
Let's bring in Newt Gingrich, Fox News contributor, former Speaker of the House, and 2012 GOP presidential candidate and author of Vengeance. Thanks for being with us, Mr. Speaker. What do you think about this message? Because, you know, we've heard the president in the past say when he goes to conferences and he meets with world leaders, they have their best interest in mind. It's time America do the same.
Look, I think Trump has been exactly right on this whole theme from the very beginning. We went through a cycle where we had people who thought, you know, you should submerge the United States in some vague global system, but there is no global system. I fully expect the Chinese president to put China first. I expect the Saudi king to put Saudi Arabia first. We watch Putin every morning put Russia first. Merkel puts Germany first. I think he's being honest. He's not there for some vague global generalization. Does he want alliances? Sure, if they're good for America. Does he want trade deals? Sure, if they're good for America. And he expects the other side to have the same attitude. The Macron of France, who he seems to get along with very well, he wants the best deal for France, but that means that he's going to represent France and Trump is going to represent the U.S. I think it'll be fascinating. You know,
I know.
This is a president who came off of a bunch of big wins. Now he's going, I think, has a chance to have another big win in Davos and then come home to a State of the Union. He could be on a pretty big roll by mid-February.
You could be right. Newt, let's talk a little bit about a big story. It was our lead story yesterday, and that is the fact that those two anti-Trump lovebirds at the FBI, when the FBI and the Department of Justice was handing over to the Congress on Friday a bunch of the messages, they said, and by the way, we're missing 5 months' worth. Well, according to Sean Hannity now, they've been able to start to recover some of them. We don't know how they're doing it, whether it's the NSA or maybe they just weren't missing to start with. They weren't really lost. They were somewhere. But what does this say to you about what game the FBI might be playing with all of us?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think 98% of the FBI agents are hardworking, very serious about enforcing the law, and are the people that we've always respected. But for some reason at the very top in the last few years, you've had a bunch of people who, frankly, have been running a corrupt operation. And I'm not surprised following on what happened at the IRS. Well, it's corrupt in the sense, first of all, that they're not obeying the law. Their primary interest is not the law. When you have somebody say, well, let's get together so we can have a secret group to undermine Trump, that's a pretty huge break in the American system. When you discover, for example, that apparently they believed at the very top that the fix was in all along, that Hillary was never going to be charged, which is why she was never put under oath, which is why she could never commit perjury. I mean, you're now talking about the Attorney General, the President of the United States, the head of the FBI, Mr. Comey at the time. That's pretty wild.
Right.
One meeting they refer to is Andy McNabb, who is the #2 guy at the FBI, whose wife got $900,000 running as a McCabe running as a Democrat. So at some point you have to say, what's the deal here?
Right.
And I think it looks amazingly fishy.
But on a somewhat separate note, the Robert Mueller investigation seems to be coming to a close, I hope. I think everybody hopes. And it's probably culminating with an interview with the president. If he was to call you, and he might, say, what do you think I should do here, Newt? What would you tell him?
Listen to your lawyers.
Yeah.
I'm not a lawyer. I think anybody who deals with that kind of investigation without first-rate lawyers, and anybody who doesn't listen to the advice of first-rate lawyers, is very foolish. But I also make this prediction. Mueller will not go away quietly. Mueller will find somebody to indict for something. I'd be shocked if he brought that number of high-class Democratic lawyers who are very highly paid, got them to divert their career for 6 months to a year, and then said, oh, by the way, there was nothing there. Now, you do have, of course, some of those tweets you're talking about were, in fact, or rather the text messages were, in fact, saying, the number 2 guy in counterintelligence saying, I don't know that I want to go to work for Mueller because I don't think there's anything there. Right. Now, this is a guy who hated Trump but did not believe there was anything legally serious in what Mueller's looking into.
What do you think about John Kerry? The news this morning is that John Kerry was telling an ally of Mahmoud Abbas that he might run for president in 2020, and he's urging Palestinians to play for time and to not give in to Trump.
According to the Jerusalem Post.
And to personally attack Donald Trump.
That would surprise me. Kerry knows, as a former Secretary of State, former U.S. Senator, that kind of advice would be stunningly unpatriotic. And I don't think that John Kerry would do something like that. I hope he wouldn't. I'm perfectly happy for him to run for president. I think, look, the more Democrats who decide that they want to run for president, the better off we're going to be in 2020. I think Trump will beat any of them, so it doesn't concern me very much. I think the economic boom we're starting into is going to, in fact, perform very well this fall for Republicans. And I think that it's going to perform very well for Trump in 2020, because the contrast between the Democrats' inability to create jobs for 8 years and what Trump is doing is going to be so great that I think the country will vote for more jobs and higher take-home pay, you know, in a better future. It's not complicated. So Kerry can run if he wants to. It's a free country. I'd be very, very surprised if Secretary of State, Senator John Kerry would have said anything that was that overtly anti-American.
Because it's way out of bounds.
No kidding. All right, Newt, thank you very much for joining us today.
It's crazy.
All right. Thank you, sir.